Kids from the ages of 2 to 19 consume about 7 trillion calories in sugar-sweetened beverages per year, according to Steve Gortmaker of the Harvard School of Public Health. He spoke at the Obesity Society annual scientific meeting in San Antonio on September 23. 7 trillion is a lot of calories in sugar-sweetened beverages. At, for example, 50 cents per can, it's about $24 billion a year. All of those dollars and sugary calories are stoking the childhood obesity epidemic. Currently, in the U.S., about 17% of children and adolescents are obese, that's more than 12.5 million kids. And new research in the British Medical Journal suggests that obese children will have much higher risk factors for cardiovascular disease as adults. Even as kids, their hearts are changing shape to look like those of adults at risk for heart disease. But the good news is that simply cutting out an about of 64 calories a day from kids' diets could start to level out the steep rise in childhood obesity. That's equivalent to less than half a can of most non-diet sodas. Icy objects such as comets may have helped start life on Earth by delivering water and carbon-based molecules to the young planet. Because putting something on ice doesn't necessarily keep it from changing, a new study finds that even in frigid, deep space environments, simple hydrocarbon molecules can react to become more complex ones. The process even works when temperatures drop to near absolute zero. But just what kind of organic molecules would exist on the icy bodies of a forming solar system? Researchers at the Jet Propulsion Laboratory in Pasadena, California, investigated how organic molecules might evolve toward greater complexity even in the cold of interstellar space. The scientists found that ultraviolet light, which radiates from stars and galaxies, can induce rapid changes in icy hydrocarbon molecules cooled to 5 Kelvin, that's a frosty minus 451 degrees Fahrenheit. The chemical reactions resulted in molecules of more complexity, which is the right direction to go if you want to eventually make amino acids and biological molecules. The study appears in the Astrophysical Journal Letters. It just goes to show, if you really want to freeze something in place, you'd better encase it in carbonite. Secret identities aren't just for superheroes anymore. Researchers have found that a protein present in everything from amoebas to people is living a double life. Once it binds to DNA, the protein, called RFIH, rips apart, and then refolds into a different shape, to do a different job. RFIH is a transcription protein, attached to or freed from a stretch of DNA. It determines if a gene is expressed or not. But once the protein has carried out its task, its helical structure unravels. Within seconds, it refolds into a barrel structure, which has a new role, this time in translation, where it helps the cell produce amino acids for new proteins. The study is in the journal Cell. The next step is to find out if the barrel can refold into the helix. After that, researchers want to see if proteins similar to RFIH, which are present in all life on Earth, are capable of comparable molecular contortion. Which would mean a lot more bang for our protein buck. Some people turn their homes into pack rat middens. Such hoarding was thought to be a type of obsessive-compulsive disorder, OCD. But in the most recent Diagnostic Manual of Disorders, hoarding is proposed to be a unique condition. It's now thought to be more about avoiding making decisions about than a general obsession with them. In a recent study, scientists compared the brain activity of hoarders with that of those with OCD, while the subjects were deciding whether to keep or toss their own junk mail and the junk mail of others. Did not affect the brain activity or choices of those with OCD. But the hoarders were different. Their decision-making brain circuit was quiet when contemplating others' mail, but became overactive for decisions about their own mail. Not surprisingly, hoarders kept more of their own mail than the OCD group did. The study is in the Archives of General Psychiatry. Hoarders' self-ratings of indecisiveness with the amount of activity in brain circuits related to exaggerated of the risk of a wrong decision. The researchers suggest that hoarding behavior has its own specific symptoms and should be treated differently than OCD. We sign our names to various documents all the time. Some signatures seal a legal contract. Others pledge us to an action. Now a study finds that when and where someone signs a document can influence the likelihood of them being honest or cheating. Scientists had people sign more than 13,000 auto insurance forms. One group signed at the top of the form, the other at the bottom. And those who signed at the top admitted to nearly 2,500 more miles of usage than those who signed at the bottom, which translated into a $48 difference in annual premiums. According to the researchers, because the top signers put their names on the document before they were even tempted to fabricate information, they are less likely to act dishonestly. The study is in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Many people routinely deceive themselves to rationalize dishonest behavior. The $345 billion gap between what people should be paying in U.S. taxes and what they claim isn't just due to chronic liars. It also depends on normally honest people stretching the truth. Perhaps having taxpayers sign their forms before filling them out would cut down on that stretching. You might not know how many calories were in that sandwich. But if you got lunch at the Massachusetts General Hospital cafeteria, you could tell with one glance whether you'd made a healthful choice. Offerings are color-coded. Simply posting calories does not always get consumers to make healthier choices. So researchers tried something different. Mass General's cafeteria food and beverage options were classified as least, somewhat, or most healthful with red, yellow, or green labels. Green is healthiest. Researchers then tracked some 4,600 employees. About 6 months after the changes were made, the purchases of red label food decreased by more than 15%, and red beverages dropped by 39%. Green food and drink purchases increased, according to the study in the American Journal of Preventive Medicine. Making healthy food choices easier could especially help the poor, the undereducated, the very populations most affected by the obesity epidemic. The London Olympics are about to begin, and spectators will again be riveted by feats that would have been impossible when the modern Olympics began in 1896. Jaw-dropping records are attainable in part because of advances in materials science. New materials have led to equipment like super light and strong vaulting poles, and bathing suits that improve the flow of bodies in water. Such developments are detailed in a series of articles in the journal Nature Materials. The scientists say other advances are afoot that build sensors into athletes' clothing for instance, measuring performance in training, or protective gear that repairs itself when damaged. And advances in materials science can help Olympians internally as well. Elite athletes may tear cartilage or break bones. But cartilage doesn't have enough blood and cells to mend well, and sometimes bones just can't naturally bridge the break. So scientists are homing in on the best combinations of biocompatible materials, along with growth factors and other compounds, as well as implanted cells and proteins, to help mend what have been until now nearly intractable injuries, so that world-class athletes can push the limits of sports and science. It's not easy being yellow. Bananas now face 2 separate fungal epidemics, which threaten to pluck the fruit off of our tables. Fortunately, researchers have now sequenced banana DNA, producing the genome of a banana variety that may hold the secret to defeating the diseases. The report is in the journal Nature. Today, half of all bananas, including the ones you probably buy, belong to the Cavendish variety, whose popularity stems in part from having no seeds. But this trait also removes sexual reproduction from the equation. The bananas are thus all genetically identical, and identically vulnerable to the two fungal epidemics, Panama disease and black leaf streak disease. Researchers sequenced the genome of a banana variety called D.H. Bahang, whose genes contributed to the Cavendish. While the genome shows where this fruit fits in the history of plant evolution, it could also help researchers understand why D.H. Bahang, unlike its descendant, is resistant to the funguses behind both Panama and black leaf streak disease. Knowing the genes responsible for this resistance could help breeders create stronger, more resistant bananas, which has a lot of appeal. Interesting sound. I would have guessed a Wild West performer was practicing with a bullwhip while also vacuuming. But no. That sound is apparently produced by the aurora borealis, the northern lights. Since 2000, researchers at Finland's Aalto University have been collecting audio, as part of what's called the Aurora Acoustics Project. Folk tales have long held that the lights also produce odd sounds, but the claims were hard to prove. And some researchers thought that any noises produced by the energetic particles that cause the light show would be far too high in the sky to be heard on the ground. But the latest results indicate that at least some sounds are produced very close to the ground. A setup of 3 ground-based microphones allowed researchers to estimate that the sounds occur perhaps just 70 meters up. The results were just presented at the International Congress on Sound and Vibration in Vilnius, Lithuania. More information about the sounds of the northern lights could lead to a more complete understanding of the phenomenon. So if you see an aurora, keep your ears open. Just like corporations, stars, too, can engage in mergers and acquisitions, a new study has identified a pair of white dwarf stars heading toward a merger. White dwarfs are the hot, super-dense remnants of spent stars. In a binary system called J0651, 2 white dwarfs circle each other very rapidly. The binary pairing completes an orbit in less than 13 minutes. And that already rapid orbital dance is speeding up as the 2 white dwarfs spiral in on each other. Each year, their orbital period shrinks by 0.3 milliseconds. That's actually a pretty dramatic change on astronomical timescales. In about 1 million years, the white dwarfs will get so close that the larger one will start to cannibalize its smaller companion. Before long, the 2 stars will likely become one. The study appears in the Astrophysical Journal Letters. The tightly wound white dwarf binary should also be radiating gravitational waves, ripples in the fabric of space and time. But today's gravitational wave detectors are not sensitive enough to detect them. That's okay, astronomers have another 1 million years before things get really interesting. To build an instrument that's up to the task. Scientists are looking for Earth-like planets around other stars. But one way to limit the search can be to figure out where an Earth-like planet cannot exist and eliminate those types of systems. In a new study, astronomers turned their attention to so-called hot Jupiters. These are Jupiter-sized planets that have an orbit of only about 3 days. The scientists looked at 63 hot Jupiters to see if they could find evidence for any nearby Earth-like planets. They found none. But it could be that the companion planets are too small in size or mass or just aren't detectable with the current techniques. So the researchers then turned to hot Neptunes and warm Jupiters. These are Jupiters with slightly longer orbits. They found only 2 potential nearby planets among 222 hot natures. And of the 31 warm Jupiters, 5 showed evidence of a companion. The findings are in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. The current theory is that hot Jupiters formed and then migrated in towards their stars. The researchers say that the migration might have disrupted the formation of Earth-like planets. Good thing our Jupiter kept its cool. Does an ice-cold drink actually taste better than the same beverage at room temperature? Depends on what its taste is. A new study finds that the intensity of some flavors varies with temperature. The work is in the journal Chemosensory Perception. Researchers took solutions that tasted bitter, sour, sweet, or astringent, a flavor found in legumes and raw produce that creates a dry, puckering feel in the mouth. They either chilled the solutions to 5 degrees Celsius, the recommended temperature for keeping food cool, or heated the solutions to 35 degrees Celsius, a couple degrees below human body temperature. Volunteers then rated the tastes. Both sour and astringent solutions tasted stronger at warm temperatures, and the intensity lasted longer than it did with chilled drinks. Bitter flavors came through best when chilled. And temperature had no effect on perception of sweetness. For most people, temperature can enhance flavors. But for some, dubbed thermal tasters, temperature alone can be a flavor. Heating or cooling parts of the tongue creates the sensation of taste without food, a finding that's hard to swallow. As it ages, white paper turns a distinctive yellow. But why? To find out, scientists artificially aged modern paper to reveal the changes on the molecular level. The research is in the journal Physical Review Letters. For 48 days, 3 unbleached paper samples aged rapidly in reactors that simulated different environmental conditions. The researchers then compared the artificially aged samples to the real deal, 3 pieces of paper crafted in 15th century Europe. This technique allowed them to gauge the types and amounts of changes going on. About 90% of the weight of old paper is cellulose, the sturdy material that makes up plant cell walls. But over time, cellulose fibers oxidize. The process modifies parts of various molecules and turns them into what are called chromospheres, which absorb light. White paper is white because it reflects all colors of light. Aging paper filled with chromospheres reflects wavelengths that make it look yellow. The non-destructive technique used in this study could inform research to preserve and even whiten ancient texts and art. And give paper conservation a brighter outlook. On election day, where do you vote? If it's in a church, you might be inclined to vote more conservatively than if you cast your ballot at a school or government building. That's according to research published in the International Journal for the Psychology of Religion. And the effect seems to hold, whether you're Christian, Muslim or agnostic, progressive, independent or conservative. The study found that when random people were surveyed in front of a church, they gave more socially and politically conservative responses than people surveyed while standing in front of a government building. The shift in people's attitudes, the researchers suggest, was likely a result of visual priming, meaning that people who could see the religious building were, consciously or not, getting cues that influenced their response. The surveys were conducted in Europe, so it's possible American voters might react differently. But the survey included subjects from more than 30 countries to try to minimize a particular national bias. So before you cast your vote this election year, think about whether your view is influencing your views. Music, film and video game makers face a new online, digital world. And some are testing a revolutionary pricing system, pay what you want. But a new study finds that when consumers can name their own price, many may opt out of buying at all. The study is in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. For the research, tour boat passengers posed for photos. Each boat ride announced a price of $15 per picture. But they then charged either $15, $5, or the option to pay what you want. As expected, the fewest tourists purchased photos when they had to pay full price. But more customers bought photos when they cost $5 than when prices were pay what you want, which could have saved passengers even more. The researchers suggest that choosing to pay less than an announced lower than expected price made people feel cheap. With choices then limited to spending more money or feeling like a tightwad, potential customers simply opted out of the purchase. so on sea or land, a low, set price may catch the most fish. If you enjoy sharing all your likes and dislikes on Facebook, you're definitely not alone. Research finds that broadcasting personal opinions gives people the same sense of reward as earning money. The study is in the Proceedings of the National Academy of Sciences. Study subjects had their brains scanned while they either talked about their opinions or judged the beliefs of another. And sharing their own point of view stimulated more activity in the reward processing parts of the subjects' brains. In another experiment, participants got to choose among reporting their own opinion, judging someone else's opinion, or answering a true or false question. And for each choice, they could earn varying amounts of money. Rather than maximize their winnings by answering the questions that were worth the most cash, people preferred to talk about themselves even though they sacrificed an average of 17% of their potential earnings to do it. For the participants, sharing personal information was its own reward. Which means that people like comedian Patton Oswalt, who tweets photos of what he's having for lunch, probably feel like $1 million. Americans still fall short of the recommended daily portions of fruits and vegetables. And kids are notoriously averse to veggies at the school cafeteria. So researchers tested whether visual cues of healthful foods could increase consumption at a grade school with 800 students. First, the scientists determined how many kids put carrots and green beans on their trays and how much they ate. 3 months later, they did the same analysis. But on the second day, the trays had pictures of carrots and green beans in the trays compartments. On the day with the photo cues, more than twice as many kids took green beans as on the control day, and more than 3 times as many kids took carrots. Average consumption per student went up as well. The study was published in the Journal of the American Medical Association. The researchers note that the effect needs to be tested elsewhere for longer than 2 days. And the amount of veggies eaten still did not meet government recommendations. But if pictures of burgers can sell meaty meals, maybe fresh fruit and veggie food photos can play a part in the campaign for healthier kids. Global warming might seem like a botanical boon. After all, milder temperatures and more carbon dioxide and nitrogen should feed flora. But a 10-year study has found that any initial positive effect on plant growth from climate change may soon disappear. The report is in the journal Nature Climate Change. Researchers transplanted vegetation from 4 grassland ecosystems to lower, warmer elevations. They also modified the precipitation at the transplant sites, based on altered rainfall estimates. For the first year, the plants did great, producing more biomass and churning out more oxygen for us. But their productivity went down for the rest of the decade. What happened? Warming did speed up the nitrogen cycle, which should have increased nitrogen's availability as plant fertilizer. But a lot of the nitrogen left the soil through runoff or uptake into the atmosphere. In addition, productive native plants began to lose out to species that thrive at higher temperatures, but are less productive than the natives. Warmer temperatures may spur immediate growth, but in the long term, we can't expect plants to like it hot. Every time you inhale, oxygen passes from your windpipe to your lungs and on into your bloodstream. But what if your windpipe was blocked? Getting the gas straight to your blood could save your life. Wait, put down that syringe. A large air bubble in a blood vessel can kill you. But what if the bubbles were only a few millionths of a meter in diameter? Researchers coated tiny amounts of oxygen gas with fatty molecules to create microparticles. Suspended in solution, the microparticles formed a foam containing 50 to 90% oxygen. In a beaker of blood, the foam was able to quickly transfer its oxygen to the cells. Then the researchers tested it in animals. Normally, a blocked windpipe cuts off the blood's supply of oxygen, leading to brain damage and death. But when rabbits with blocked windpipes received injections of the microparticles, their blood oxygen levels and heart rates remained stable. The work is in the journal Science Translational Medicine. The foam may someday buy time for human patients, so that even someone with a closed airway can breathe easy. Dogs are not just man's best friend. Previous studies have shown that kids with dogs are less likely to develop asthma. Now a new study may show how, if results from mice apply to us. The work was presented at a meeting of the American Society for Microbiology. The study tests what's called the hygiene hypothesis. The idea is that extreme cleanliness may actually promote disease later on. Researchers collected dust from homes that had a dog. They fed that house dust to mice. They then infected the mice with a common childhood infection called respiratory syncytial virus, or RSV. Mice who ate the dog dust were protected against RSV infection symptoms, like inflamed, mucus-coated airways, suggesting exposure helped them stave off the virus. Those mice also had more diverse communities of gut bacteria than control mice did. The researchers say our pets' microbes may colonize our gut too, and help the immune system learn to respond to infections. That's important because when kids develop severe RSV, their risk of asthma goes up. So next time Buster sheds all over the couch, think of it as a bonus dose of probiotics.